Hello everyone and welcome back to the FPL Phillips YouTube channel. It's time for my Game Week 4 initial transfer plans and thoughts, and to be honest, I'm only releasing this because the last few games of Game Week 3 don't really make too much of a difference to what I'm thinking in terms of transfers. I've even got a few thoughts with regards to the wildcard as well, which I might mention in this video. But if you are new around here, please do make sure to subscribe. We've got a lot of new subscribers recently, so hello to all of you who are hopefully tuning back in, but it's still something ridiculous, like only 10 or 12% of people who are actually subscribed who watch this video, so it would really help me out if you do choose to do so. Leave a thumbs up as well on the video to help me out with the algorithm, but without further ado, let's get into talking some FPL. So first of all, we're going to kind of cover the fixtures and which teams I'm looking to target players from in the first place over the next kind of game weeks, and with my transfers or transfer that I've got, I suppose, ahead of game week 4. And the reason that a lot of the games today aren't too much of my focus is that not many of the teams are very high on this fixture ticket at all, and in fact, a lot of the teams near the top have already played, so we've been able to assess their performance and things like that heading into game week 4. So Brentford and Spurs, teams like that up towards the top. Man City, the only one I'm really that interested in watching today at the 2 PM game. But we've got teams like Brighton towards the bottom, West Ham, probably the only one towards the bottom of this list that I'm even considering players from for maybe a short-term punt on that Luton game. But I do think it's interesting the kind of order of the fixtures that we've got. Teams like Brentford still looking like ones you can target. Spurs and Chelsea, we all know, have had these fixture swings. There are a few other teams kind of creeping into the mix now. Newcastle are getting themselves into the top 10. Of course, game week 6 for them is really the period where we're going to want to be jumping on their assets. But there are a lot of teams around the mid-table mark, around Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal a little bit further down, where we're undecided on a couple of their assets at the moment. Maybe looking to ship out the likes of a Martinelli in the Arsenal midfield, which we'll get into. But I thought it was interesting, a nice graphic from the Tim Buyer fixture ticker, which will be linked down below in the description. But if you want to look more in depth of it, of course, take a screenshot, visit the link, do whatever you want to right now. And I think two of the main ones that we're going to want to target are the ones that you can see on screen right now. James Maddison and Raheem Sterling both put in very splendid performances in Game Week 3 and have, as we saw, those really nice fixtures coming up over the next couple of games where we're probably going to want to bring one, if not both of them, into our midfield at the moment. I think that's the area of the pitch, other than defence maybe, if you own someone like a Gabriel, where managers are looking to make a lot of transfers at the moment. So who is the better option if you can only bring one in ahead of Game Week 4? Well, this is the breakdown of the stats for you. In terms of minutes per game, Maddison has played more minutes so far, as you'd kind of expect. He's so key for that Spurs side, but both assets getting a lot of minutes, and Sterling is a very talismanic player in that Chelsea side. In terms of expected FPL points so far, James Maddison is outperforming Raheem Sterling. They're even for XG, but Maddison does have more expected assists per 90, which is the thing that's lifting him up in terms of that expected FPL points total. And over the next couple of games is very neck and neck, so that's only for game week 4 to 6. That does also include the tough away trip to the Emirates that Spurs have. So even with that, Maddison is predicted to match Sterling over the next 3. I suppose the home game against Aston Villa is going to be no small feat for Chelsea either, so both teams arguably have a pretty tough fixture in the next 3. Maddison then faces Liverpool at home in Game Week 7, which I've kind of changed myself to a grey fixture because I don't think the Liverpool defence is anything to be raved about at all. I don't think it should be a red fixture on here, so I have changed that to grey manually myself. The Chelsea fixtures are still better overall, I think, despite having a few away games in there too. They've both got the same amount of away games, but one is against Luton for Spurs. Overall, my initial thoughts on who I would bring in if I could only bring in one this week is probably going to be Raheem Sterling. And I know Nottingham Forest are a pretty decent side, but away from home, they are a lot poorer than they are at home. And they did pretty well at Old Trafford, that thing can be said. But I still think that Chelsea might hit some serious form now. Raheem Sterling, alongside Jackson and Chilwell, probably seem like the ideal Chelsea triple-up to own at the moment. But I think if you went Gusto, for example, and you own him alongside Chilwell and Jackson, then there's definitely no problem at all with going Maddison, and I'd be very happy to have him in my team as an alternative to bring in this week. But we will get onto some other midfield options in case maybe you already own Maddison and, like I said, have a triple-up on Chelsea that doesn't involve Raheem Sterling. But who are the main ones that we're going to look to ship out to bring in these midfielders anyway? And I didn't personally start the season with this midfield, but I know a lot of people did. They started with these 4 assets. The 2 are Manchester United ones in Bruno and Rashford, and then Saka and Martinelli from Arsenal. And to be honest, it's been a little bit underwhelming. I think there was some redemption from Bruno Fernandes, and he finally cashed in on all that expected data in game week 3. And that's just emphasised by his expected FPL points per 90 total, which you can see here. This is the per 90 average, I should say, over the first 3 game weeks. And it is way ahead of all the other assets here. So 9.05 per 90. It includes a penalty, of course, but so does Bukayo Saka's. And that's what you get with penalty takers. Over the first 3, getting 1 penalty. We've seen quite a lot of penalties already. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe not to that order, but we do see a penalty every 3 or 4 games for a player down the line this season. So I think for that reason, Saka and Bruno Fernandes are the ones you keep. And in fact, I've probably put them in priority order from left to right here. And I think you can see from the numbers that Martinelli is the one that should be on the chopping block. I think the eye test confirms that as well. With how wide he's been hugging, he has been getting in the box and taking a couple of shots. But overall, nothing like the kind of performances we've seen from Martinelli in previous years. They, of course, face off against each other in Game Week 4, which is maybe another reason to sell. There have been goal fests in the past between Manchester United and Arsenal, but I think on paper, it definitely looks like a week to maybe remove Martinelli for someone like a Maddison or a Raheem Sterling, and that will be a very common transfer move, I think, this week for experienced FPL managers, and one that I think, for all the right reasons, looks like a promising transfer to make. But another team that did really surprise me and impress me, to be honest, in Game Week 3 were West Ham, and I think they kind of shocked everyone with the result that they got away at Brighton, and they did really well with a limited amount of possession, hitting Brighton on the counter-attack, who, in truth, do probably have one of the slowest defences in the league, so I think that really played into Moyes' tactical approach, and West Ham's forwards were fully able to take advantage of it, and I think Bowen and Ward-Prowse really shone in that game in particular. I really liked the look of Paqueta, and I thought that Benrahma on the left-hand side did really well too. The one thing that with West Ham is that's a little bit unclear at the moment is who is on penalty takers. So we mentioned the importance of that with Bruno and Saka. At West Ham, it's probably going to be Benrahma or Ward-Prowse from what I've heard from people. Benrahma did take them last season ahead of Bowen, so I think he's maybe a little bit less likely to have the spot kicks. But Ward-Prowse coming in as a very accomplished set-piece taker, it would not surprise me if we see West Ham get a penalty and him step up to take it from 12 yards. And the main appeal of bringing in a West Ham asset this week, I think, is just that Luton fixture. Luton look pretty diabolical at the moment. Their stadium should be up and hopefully ready for this fixture. I'm pretty sure they're hosting a midweek game at it, so I'd be very shocked if this one gets postponed too. But definitely something that would put me off at least making an early transfer for one of these guys. But I think the main thing putting me off at the moment is that I just have quite a few fires in my team, and I can't afford to make what could just be a one-week punt on a Bowen or on a Ward-Prowse for the game against Luton, and then be looking at them with a Man City fixture in Game Week 5 and wanting to be transferring them out again. But who's the better option if maybe you do have the luxury of 2 free transfers this week, a team that looks pretty decent already, or maybe you just fancy a punt? Maybe you think that Moyes is doing pretty well tactically this season, which you'd be right in thinking, and that maybe he can go and do some damage at Man City against Liverpool, for example, in Game Week 6 as well. Maybe there's an argument that West Ham could be better against some of the tougher teams on paper. I suppose that's just one thing that needs to be more reading into, and probably someone with more experience and ball knowledge than me to take a look at. But it is something that is worth noting, that they've performed against Chelsea, they've performed against Brighton. Maybe we're going to see some big upsets from West Ham over the course of the next few games as well. So perhaps the fixtures aren't something to read into quite as much with a side like West Ham, who are going to look to hit these big sides on the counter-attack. In terms of the data from these 2 assets, Bowen does seem to be the one to go for if you just look at the expected FPL points per 90. A lot of that goal threat from Ward-Prowse is getting that, but Bowen has actually had more expected assists so far, which is something that I probably wouldn't expect to continue in the future. Of course, it is still quite a small sample size with only 3 game weeks played so far, and Ward-Prowse, not featuring for the entirety of the season. Expected points over the next 3 also go in favour of Bowen. There's quite a significant gulf there, which I wouldn't expect to maybe play out. I think Ward-Prowse, with the benefit of set pieces, corners, free kicks, I think he will get near to, if not match Bowen and outscore him. But either way, I think if you're looking to go for one of these assets, the main thing is basically, can you afford to just go for him for 1 week, or do you fancy West Ham against some of these tougher sides in the future? So that's what you've got. You've got Maddison, you've got Sterling, you've got the potential to go for a West Ham midfielder. Of the 2, I'd prefer Bowen to go for. But there is another asset that I want to weigh up alongside some of these options. And that player is one who's already had a price drop down to 6.4 and is probably going to get overlooked ahead of this game week just due to the fact that his team as a whole haven't been producing the highest amount of XG totals over the first couple of games. And that is Eze, who you can see on screen right now. And I've put his data alongside Sterling's, Maddison's, Bowen's as well, who's my favourite out of the 2 we've just seen. But Eze, how does he compare? And could he be an option to go for? Maybe if you're lacking a little bit of budget and you can't quite afford to go for a Maddison or Sterling, or just how does he compare in general? Because the expected data doesn't look too shabby for him over the first couple of game weeks, and he does have the best set of fixtures over the next couple out of the 4 options available. So Crystal Palace are ranking 3rd, Sterling down in 5th, and Maddison 6th when we look at the game week range of game week 4 to game week 8. I think a lot of managers will be wildcarding around that game week 9 time after the international break, so this is the period that I think is probably the most essential to look at the moment when considering a transfer option. In terms of expected FPL points per 90, Eze was quite a lot ahead actually in previous game weeks, but this game week has brought the likes of Sterling and Maddison up in terms of those numbers. Eze is stuck down at 4.85, but still has a rather nice XG total of 0.35, only a little bit behind Sterling and Maddison, who as we saw are both matched on 0.38, but Bowen is well ahead on that 0.56 total. I think it's a little bit skewed just from this one game where he had some really nice open chances against Brighton in this one. In terms of expected assists, Eze does actually come in second very narrowly, but Maddison is the one who's miles ahead on 0.37. And big chance involvements, that's where we see Eze fall off really, is that Crystal Palace, with their XG totals, we've seen that. They've not had a lot of big opportunities. Eze has been the one created the chances, really, that they have had, or he's been the one who's had them himself. He should arguably have had a penalty in game week 2 already, and as mentioned with Saka and also with Bruno Fernandes, they both have penalties and they've actually won some, whereas you'd argue there's potential for Sterling and Bowen and Maddison maybe even to not have penalties. I think Bowen's pretty unlikely. I'd say Sterling's rather unlikely as well, as we saw Enzo take the last one, but maybe Sterling comes in and takes it off him. I think there's a very, very slim chance of that happening. I'd say out of the rest of the options, Maddison is the other one most likely to maybe take a spot kick for Spurs, and he does have the best data anyway. You can kind of look and isolate the columns and find that Maddison is probably the standout option to go for if you're just looking at the data. I still prefer Maddison and Sterling over Eze, but if you fancy a punt and a little bit of a differential, or maybe even if you just hold Eze and are continuing to think maybe I should sell him, I still think you should hold on to him for this game week unless you have no other problems to sort out, which I think is pretty rare at the moment with all the disasters that seem to be going on this game week. And it's not all just about midfielders anyway, there is something else that we need to consider when we're looking at teams like Spurs and Chelsea, looking up a lot of their assets, thinking, ooh, I fancy that one, I fancy that one. We've got to look at the combinations of which players we want to go for and consider, are we blocking ourselves out of a different triple up? And that's why I thought it would be interesting to compare two very highly performing defenders in game week 3, Udogie and Gusto of Chelsea. They both did very well. Are we considering bringing in one of these guys? And if so, is going for Gusto going to block you getting Sterling? Which one do you need to prioritise going for in your team? And I think the fixtures would suggest that Chelsea have the better chance of clean sheets over the next couple. I think with the tactical setup that Ange is going for, we're not going to see too many clean sheets for Spurs. So maybe a little bit fortunate to end up with one in game week 3. But I don't think you go for that for Udogie for too much. I think you go for him mainly for that attacking threat that he does offer. And of course, the other thing with Gusto is that you are going for a little bit of a ticking time bomb, waiting until Reece James regains fitness. He'll come back in for how many games? I suppose, I'm not sure, until he picks up another injury. Probably about 2 games average it is at the moment. And then Gusto will presumably come back into the side. But he has been performing very well and is obviously 0.5 cheaper than Udogie. There have been prices and changes and all that that, so Udogie might actually be at 4.6 right now. But either way, I don't think budget is affecting us too much at the moment with our teams, because apart from Haaland, there isn't really any other premium that many of us are looking to own. But in terms of this too, the data suggests that going with Udogie would be the better option, although Gusto has actually scored quite a lot of points and a lot coming from those chances that he created in Game Week 3, of course. He didn't actually have a high amount of expected assists in that game, and he was perhaps overperforming what he should have got in that game. The expected FPL points per 90 go in favour of Udogie, but as mentioned, the points per 90 in favour of Gusto, which would suggest he's slightly overperforming what he should be doing. The XG, Udogie on way ahead of Gusto, 0.12 compared to 0.03. But yeah, the assist threat is where Gusto really shone in that game. But Udogie still has higher XA on 0.30 compared to Gusto's 0.21. And over the next three, the predicted points still go in favour of Udogie. We mentioned with Maddison and with Sterling, that tricky fixture against Arsenal, the tricky fixture against Villa, those are still included in the next three fixtures, of course. Personally, my priority would be to go for Udogie, and I think with James Maddison being the only real of the Spurs option, we don't have to worry about there being a triple up that you block there. If you do go with Gusto, then I think you're looking a little bit more dangerous with Jackson, Chilwell and Sterling probably looking the ideal triple up, as I've already mentioned. So for that reason, I think that would definitely push me to go for Udogie if I make a defensive transfer this week, which with Gabriel in my team, I'm looking very likely to do. Or maybe if you're considering jumping off Estupinian, don't want to bench him this week, don't fancy starting him, you could do Estupinian to Udogie or any other defender that is not performing, which there seem to be a lot of in FPL at the moment. And we've discussed that Chelsea triple up. People are looking to add Sanchez into their team at the moment, and this is the reason why I would avoid it. Not only is Sanchez taking up that Chelsea spot, there's a better keeper on paper from the data anyway, and I would urge anyone who's considering going for Sanchez to probably urge away from him. There are a lot of teams at the moment that seem to have two goalkeepers coming in, and Chelsea are one of them. They've signed a new keeper who's there to apparently compete with Sanchez, so he is a little bit of a risk for game time. And I think the reason a few of us are considering making transfers with regards to the goalkeeper this week is for that same reason. I personally own Sam Johnston, and we've seen Dean Henderson come in and join there. Maybe he'll be coming in and playing some games. I can't imagine him going from being number 2 at United to number 2 at Crystal Palace without being made some sort of assurance here with regards to game time. So a little bit unclear on that, as I do really rate Johnston, but I might end up having to make a goalkeeper transfer in the next couple of game weeks. I think if you own Pickford at the moment, he seems to be conceding a lot of the shots that come at his goal. He's barely conceded any shots, but the ones that he does seem to end up in the back of the net. There are other keeper issues as well. People going for Onana maybe aren't back in the United defence as much. I think Luke Shaw's going to be a big loss there. So who do we bring in as a replacement? Well, as mentioned, people will be looking at Sanchez, having kept a clean sheet in Game Week 3, but I don't think he is the right call. And when you look at Flecken, initially, what might put you off are those fixtures. In Game Week 5, he faces Newcastle away, and in Game Week 8, he's got Manchester United away. But Turner, the 4.0 keeper, who a lot of us have in at the moment, does actually rotate quite well through those fixtures. So I know he's got Burnley at home in Game Week 5, for example. I'd be very happy to play him there and end up with a really nice fixture set. Forest traditionally are a lot better of a defensive unit at home, and Turner has looked pretty decent. He's impressed me so far, made a few good saves against United as well in Game Week 3. I'd be happy to start him there. So that's the first thing that actually puts me in favour of going for Flecken, especially when Chelsea still do have a tricky fixture against Aston Villa in Game Week 6 and 3 away games in their next 5 as well. The data also all suggests basically going in favour of Flecken. He conceded a bit of a freak goal in Game Week 3. Other than that, he probably should have had a clean sheet in the game against Palace. But the data all still goes in his favour. 4.11 expected FPL points per 90, expected clean sheets per 90, saves, and the bonus point system all go in favour of owning Flecken. And I suppose that alludes to what I said, that the goal was a little bit of a freak goal in Game Week 3, and he was arguably unlucky not to come away with a clean sheet in that fixture. Over the next 3 game weeks, we can see that even with the Newcastle fixture included, Flecken is on a slightly higher expected points total as well, with 11.4 compared to Sanchez's 11.2. So this is a feat I'm actually quite passionate about, is that I think Flecken is the best goalkeeper option to pick up at the moment. What I would have loved if Areola's fixtures did rotate better with Turner's, then I maybe would have considered going for him, because I think Areola has massively impressed basically all of us so far, and he made, 9 saves, so he picked up 3 save points in game week 3 as well, so I really like him as an option too. Maybe if you're just looking for the odd keeper who can come in when the West Ham games look nice, but as we saw with Bowen and with James Ward-Prowse, when we looked at the West Ham fixtures, they rank very low down at the moment, 19th in the fixture ticker, so perhaps not the kind of goalkeeper fixtures that you want to be targeting, but he has looked very good on an individual note. So yeah, that's going to wrap up the initial transfer thoughts ahead of game week 4, and to be honest, there's probably not going to be that much more to add to this towards the end of the game week. A lot of these options are from the same teams and the ones I'm considering. I'm going to look to probably bring in one of those midfield options, maybe one of those defenders as well. Right now, my standouts would be Sterling or Maddison, and then I'd want Udogie in defence as well, if you don't own him already. But I'll be looking towards someone like a Botman if you're looking to get ahead of the curve maybe, because he rotates very well with Udogie down the future. So you can, if you're set up in a nicer position at the moment and you already own a few of the players in this list, you can look at things like that. I covered all the defensive rotation pairings in my last video, which was on Gabriel replacements, which to be honest is still going to be pretty relevant this week. So feel free to go and check that one out. If I remember, I'll leave a card up there. Do remember to subscribe to the channel, of course, if you are new around here, and do leave a thumbs up on the video if you did enjoy. That would massively help me out. On the last couple of videos, I managed to reply to literally every comment and get back to you with all your FPL queries and questions, so I'll try my very best to do the same as well. I might be out watching the football later this evening, but even if it's a few hours later, I'll try my best to get back to every one of you. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you guys in the next one, and goodbye.